Good evening, everyone. It's a lot easier with a microphone. If you're coming down, please come on down and get comfortable. Anna is excited, extremely excited to share with her message to you. And without further ado, I'd like to present Anna Jones.
Hey guys. So I don't know if all of you know me, but I'm Anna, of course. And I'm pretty new to this, so if I mess up, just don't really pay attention to it. Got to cut me some slack. I'm not Pastor Jerry. But today we are talking about why God puts us through pain. Like, why are we allowed to suffer? I don't know if y'all have thought that to yourselves, but I sure have. I always wonder, why do we have to put our hearts out there in the open only to be heartbroken? I wish I could stand up and tell y'all why, and I wish I could be in God's shoes, but sadly that's not how it works. I can't tell you why, because I don't know. The last thing you want to hear about when you're in pain is why you're going through what you're going through. I know you don't want to hear a theological reason of why this has happened to you. Anyone can sit down and try to talk to you through your pain, but all you know that when you're, oh my goodness, sorry guys. But you all know that when we are really hurting, no amount of words can take away that pain. That's a job for God. John 16:33 says that you will have suffering in this world. You can't escape it. God is so strong that he can use our pain and suffering to accomplish good. Some of you have gone through unimaginable pain and horrific suffering in your life. You might have wondered at one time how any good could have come from the many hits you've taken. But I'm just going to remind you of one thing. God is so powerful and so good that he took the very one thing, which was the death of his son, and used that to let anyone who follows have a place in heaven. He took the worst thing that could ever happen and turned it into the best thing that's ever happened. So why do we doubt that he can take our pain and turn it into something beautiful? God uses your pain to mold and shape who you are in ways you could have never imagined had you not gone through that point in your life. Sometimes he uses our pain to point other people towards salvation in Christ, and you'll never know that. God's hand is out there. If you are committed to following him, God will take your pain. We choose whether we turn to God or become bitter and shut people out when tough times come. Some people become so angry they lose themselves. Others can go through the exact same thing and actually become closer to God and more loving to the people that are around them. So who do you choose to be? All suffering is an opportunity for good, but not everyone can benefit and learn from it. It's in your hands what you're going to do. It's our choice. Luke chapter 17 says that the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group, but in all men. You have the power to invent and find happiness, the power to make his life free and beautiful despite the obstacles in our path. So how many of y'all have heard about David? David and Goliath? Yeah, this requires a congregational response, guys. How many of y'all have ever been rejected from a job? Anything. Yeah. We all have, and it sucks. It doesn't feel very good. But David was rejected 4 times. So Samuel came to David's dad, Jesse, and he told him that one of his sons was going to be king. And Jesse had 7 sons plus David. And so he took 7 of his sons, and he took them to Samuel, and Samuel was like, okay, I have this oil, and whoever it pours for, that's who's going to be king. So everyone had their cup, and he went and he poured it all, and it didn't pour for anybody. And Samuel was like, okay, I know God's not a liar, so obviously you have to have another son. So he was like, do you have another one? And Jesse was like, okay, surely you don't mean David. He's the youngest son. He's not as big. He's a loser. So David was rejected by his own father. So he went home, got David, took him back, and the oil poured for him because he was going to be king. So some time passed, and all of his brothers were in the army, I guess you would call it. It's pretty old times. But they they were going to fight in this war against the Philistines. And so Jesse was kind of worried about his sons, so he sent David to bring him some food. He put it in a basket, and he went down, and he was going to give it to him. Except he came down there, and everyone was hiding. He was like, what? Like, aren't y'all supposed to be warriors or something like that? So he looked on in the field, and there's Goliath, this 10-foot-tall man. He's, like, cussing out all the Christians, disrespecting them. He's cursing at God, being a bully. But, and so David was like, okay, well, obviously since all of you all are scared, like, I'm going to go out there and show it to him, So, and his brothers were like, you're half the size of us. You haven't done anything you haven't done the training, like, you can't do that. So David was rejected by his family. So he was like, okay. So he went down to the river and he picked up 5 stones, and of the smoothest ones he could find. And he marched back up there, and he went out onto the field. And he was like, I'm here, come and get me. And so Goliath, started charging at him, and he started swinging his little slingshot with the stones in him, faster and faster as Goliath was running at him. And so he threw it, or flung it, and it went right between his eyes, and he fell down. And he cut off his head and showed everybody. He was like, look, you didn't believe in me, but I did that. So he killed Goliath, even though he was already rejected by people who didn't believe in him. And King Saul heard about this, and King Saul did not like this. So he got mad, and he sent people out to go kill David. So he was rejected by his employer. That's 3 times, guys. It sucks. And so he was like, okay, what the heck, God? I just stood up for you, and now I keep getting rejected. There's people coming to kill me. He was like, I thought they were supposed to be on my side. But so David ran away. And he kept running until he came upon this cave of people who were rejected. And they were like, okay, I kind of like him. And so David became their leader. And he convinced them to run away, and they were going to go to the enemy. They were going to go to the Philistines. They tried to be in their army to escape them, and they found out that David was the one who killed Goliath, and they rejected him too. So he was just rejected by the enemy too. So people are rejected all the time. There's that boy you've always been chasing, and he rejected you, and it's like, what the heck? Well, it's because God has someone else. He wasn't right for you. There's someone else out there that's waiting to meet you. People go chase after this fantastic job, and then they get rejected from that job. Well, it's because that job was going to distract you from all that God had planned for you. He has this new job out there for you. You're just not listening to what he's calling you to do. A lot of times when people feel rejected, they quit trying. They tend to give up and live in fear of rejection and not try anything new because they don't want to fail. They suffer in a world of fear because they are afraid of rejection. But God puts rejection in your life not to suffer, but to point you away from things that were intended for you. God deprived the world of having complete control over you. Suffering never has the last word. God has the last word, and Jesus is the last word. There are people I see all the time struggling just to keep their head above water, or smiling just to keep from crying, or coming to church with aches still in their body, or people that are taking 1 step forward and 2 steps backwards. Things just aren't working the way that was planned. And a while ago, I was this person. I didn't know who to turn to. You can turn to God, or you can turn to resentment and hate. God has put you in this position to mold you. It's the ultimate test of faith. But I promise you when I say that pain has a greater purpose. God promotes you to your level of tolerance of pain. If you can't handle it, you won't be the best person that he needs you to be. 1 Corinthians 13:12 says, now we see things imperfectly, like puzzling reflections in a mirror. But then we will see everything with perfect clarity. All I know now is partial and incomplete. So I know a few of you may have known my grandfather. His name was Joel Jones. And he was just this normal guy going about his business. He had this job. He was trying to get my dad through college. He had a great life. And he kept hearing this calling to be a priest. But, he just kind of brushed it off because why would you change careers in the middle of your son going through college? That's a big risk. So he was traveling. He traveled to go on business trips. And so he packed his bags, and he was getting ready to walk out the door. And then he started getting this pain in his chest. And he was like, oh my gosh. And he was about to go on this trip. And so he called the doctor, just to make sure everything was okay. And he started naming off his symptoms. He was telling him what was wrong. Because he didn't want to go on this big trip, when he has his chest pains. And they were like, oh, you'll be fine. They said, just go on your trip. And when you come back, go see the doctor. It'll be fine. Well, so he hung up the phone, and he started getting ready to go. And he was about to get in his car, and they came back. Except this time they were worse. And he was like, heck no. He was like, I'm not going on this trip. He was like, obviously he didn't think he was going to make it. So he got in his car, he drove to the hospital, but he barely made it. His chest was like, it was in so much pain, he couldn't really see, it was just hard for him. He barely made it to the hospital. And he actually had to go through surgery. It was quadruple bypass surgery, and he barely made it out alive. He was like, after he recovered, he was like, okay, I'm not wasting any time now. I heard you, God. I'm going to listen to you now. The very next possible move he made, he became a preacher. And he touched so many people throughout this. And he was, doing fine, except for my grandma. A lot of you may know her. Her name was Frances. And she didn't really like the idea of being a preacher's wife. She was like, Joel may have been called to be a preacher, but I was not called to be a preacher's wife. And so she was kind of mad about it. She was a really private person. She didn't like her business being everywhere. Her circle was this big. But she was the best preacher's wife I could ever imagine. It changed her life. Once again, like I was saying, a decision that Joel made, God used that decision to get to my grandmother because he changed the way that she talked to people. Her circle got huge. She pointed just as many people to God as my grandfather did. So you don't know what your decisions are, how they're going to affect other people. God has a plan for us, even if we want to ignore it or save it for later. When God calls to us, he means the time is now. You just have to trust. Our God is an awesome God. He is here through every high and every low. He is here with you even when you don't see it. And actually, 267 days ago, I didn't see it. I lost my grandma 267 days ago. She taught me how to love people no matter how much they hurt me. She taught me how to see the good in everyone. She taught me how to forgive and be patient and how to put others before myself. And when she died, I kind of saw a new anger in myself. I would sit at the bottom of my shower and just hope I wouldn't wake up the next day because I was so scared to have to live the rest of my life without her. I yelled at God. I screamed. We argued. Sorry. I was so blinded by my anger that I didn't care that I hadn't been to church in a month. I didn't care that I had distanced so far from God. I started having a lot of doubts on who I was and who God was. And it wasn't all bad. I had some really close people who I think God sent to me to make sure I didn't go crazy and blow my head off. And I'm so glad I had them, but sometimes you're just so angry you don't even want to listen to people that are talking you through it. So, I'm going to be really honest with you guys for a second. So, let me just go back and tell you that in Sunday school, when you would hear about the Bible stories where God would send an angel to talk to you, or when God came to Joseph and Mary and told them they were going to have a kid, I was like, okay, I thought that was kind of a stretch. God's up there, we're down here. I don't know if he could just come to you like that. I was wrong. At my lowest point, I went to bed one night, just like any other night. And I had a dream. And in this dream, I was standing outside my grandma's house. And this wasn't weird to me because at the time we were cleaning out the house, getting things ready to sell. So I was like, okay, I just thought, that's what I was doing. I walked in the door and I was all by myself. In her house, there's like a big hallway, and there's like a few rooms on the side. And at the very end of the hallway, it's like the living room, and it's a big dining room table. And my family would spend Christmas there, Thanksgiving there. Like, that table kind of means a lot. Like, that's where we spent our time. So I was walking down this hallway, and it was getting lighter then, and I was like I thought I was the only person there. And so I started hearing laughing, and I was like, what the heck? Like, once again, I thought I was the only person there. And I was walking, and I turned the corner, and I saw my whole family at this big table, and they were just eating and laughing, and they were talking. And I looked to my left, and my grandma was standing right there. And I was kind of shocked. I didn't know what to do. I was kind of shocked, and I was like, looked at my family, and then looked at her, and I was like, are you seeing this? Like, she's standing right there. Like, they weren't talking to her. It's like she wasn't even there. Like, they weren't even looking at her. They were just minding their business and laughing and chilling out. And so I started crying, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, because I knew it wasn't real. I was like, there is no way you're standing in here right now. And so I went up to her, and I hugged her so tight, and I could smell her, and I could feel, how like when you hug someone, you can feel like the back of them, and you don't forget that feeling. And I mean, when I tell you she was there, she was there. And I gave her this hug, and it was a minute before she started talking to me. And she said something. She was like, Anna, I need you to stop using me as an excuse to give up and use me as an excuse to keep going. She told me that she believed in me, and she made me promise her that I was going to get back on track and do what God had planned for me. Because I had drifted so far off, and I was angry at God. I was so mad. I was just in denial. And I was like, why would you do that? And she was like, you don't see what's coming ahead of you. She was like, she told me that there was this plan for me, and it's like I needed to stop using her as an excuse to not go with that plan, because it really wasn't fair to her or fair to anyone else. So she made me promise. She was like, promise me, Anna, just promise me. And I was like, yeah, I promise. And she told me she loved me, and I told her I loved her one last time, and I just squeezed her one last time, and I woke up. And I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, was that real? God did not let me drown, because the world needs another Mai. That's what we called her. And when I woke up from this dream, I realized that she had taught me all of these things about how to walk with Jesus Christ. And I had no right to keep that information and not show others like she showed me. Like, the world needs another Mai. It's my job to carry on what she showed me. So I had woken up, and not just from my sleep. I had really woken up. God could have just left me there to suffer on my own and let me throw my life away, but he didn't. He's not going to let you drown without him trying to help you. So he reached out his hand, and he really woke me up. God took my grief, and he turned it into something more amazing. Psalm 34:18 says that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. God descends to your deepest hells. Your tears are his, your plan is his, because God is within you. But it's your decision. Are you going to lay down and take the shots, or are you going to rise up and accept the fact that you have mountains to climb and people to face? The decision is entirely up to you. So looking back at the question of why God puts us through pain, I still don't have the answer. But I just want you to understand that your pain is temporary, but your relationship with God is eternal. So keep on going. I know it's hard, but it's worth it. I promise. Thank you, guys. That's it, guys. Y'all have a great night.